Hello, everyone. I'm Margot Buckles. I am a volunteer with WASBA. And this evening's Ask a Washington Beekeeper is going to be a presentation that I had done about honey about a year ago for uh, um, family, home, science uh, educators. We had a speaker who was going to speak about pesticides, but from the East Coast, but we haven't heard from her. So you get my piece about honey instead. So I'm going to share my screen. Maybe not. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. Sorry about that. Share my screen. All right. And we're going to do the slideshow. Here we go. So this slideshow is called At Home with Honey. And as beekeepers, you're probably all very familiar with that wonderful sticky stuff. West Plains Beekeepers Association is the association that I am a member of. And we're located just to the west of Spokane. We meet in Medical Lake, Washington. Here's our information. So what we're going to cover in this talk is what is honey, how is it made, humans and honey, buying and using honey, and honey's health benefits and other bee products. So we're going to start off with what is honey? So bees produce honey by gathering and then processing nectar or secretions of other insects like honeydew from aphids to provide nourishment for their bee colonies. You all know that honey is the carbohydrate, the energy source for bees. The processing takes place within individual bees through regurgitation and mixing with enzymes and during storage in the hive through water evaporation. So I have a little video from the National Honey Board. I hope that it works. You can see this and other videos about honey at honey.com.
About 1/3 of our diet is
Well, it looks like we're having a little bit of issue with the audio on this. So I'm going to just skip ahead. You can take a look at this when, if you want, at honey.com. Um, Also, some good educational materials for information about honey can be found at through 4-H. Whoops. I'm gonna stop this and move forward, I hope. Okay, so what is honey? It is something that is sweet and viscous. That means that it doesn't move very quickly. It's made by approximately 800 bee species, of which the European honeybee, Apis mellifera, is the most well known. Bees make honey by gathering nectar and then processing it to provide nourishment for the colony, um, which consists of, as you know, the queen, the workers, the drones, and the brood. Humans and other animals enjoy the honey's sweet flavor and gather it to sweeten foods and make mead. What is honey made up of? Um, 80% of honey's components are carbohydrates, which is a good source of energy because it's immediately digestible in the small intestine. The major component of honey is fructose, and that's what gives it its sweetness. And glucose makes up about 30%, and glucose is used for fuel. So people who eat honey, who say that they're eating honey not to eat sugar, are fooling themselves because essentially honey is the same has the same chemical components as sugar. It also contains a few proteins, some vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, some enzymes, mostly glucose oxidase, and it contains water, but it has to be less than 18% water to qualify as honey. So in addition, you can see what honey is in terms of the little thing that we would see on food. 20 grams of honey or 1 tablespoon has 61 calories, 0 fat, 0 protein, 17 carbs, 0 fiber, a little riboflavin there, and a bit of copper. So how is honey made? It starts with the flower and the bee, as you know, being beekeepers. Flowers co-evolved with honeybees and other pollinators. Flower color, the nectar, the smell, pollen are all designed to attract pollinators for reproduction. And I'm sure all of you have had talks or looked into things about bees and pollination. You will know that there are things that bees prefer and that other such as say fruit. You know, we know that apples, pears, things like that are preferable to honeybees. And other pollinators go to different kinds of flowers. Bees evolved from a wasp species 100 million years ago. They developed as a eusocial organism. That is, they're a group of bees, whereas the group is the organism, not individual bees. Honeybees seek out nectar, carbohydrates, and pollen, protein, as food sources. They use a straw-like proboscis to drink the nectar into a honey stomach or crop, which is separate from their regular stomach. Foragers are the bees that are in the last stage of their lives. So again, as beekeepers, you know that when the bees are born, they spend first some time as nurse bees, sometimes as guard bees, and then at the end of their life, they become foragers. And interestingly, when the bee starts to fly, it begins to age. So one of the reasons that winter bees survive for many months is that they don't fly, not until spring. A bee can fly 3 to 5 miles to find a good nectar source. They will communicate the nectar source to other bees in the hive through either the round dance or nectar that's close to the hive, or the waggle dance for nectar sources that are further away from the hive. They use sight, ultraviolet, their vision is on a different part of the light spectrum than ours. They smell using antenna with chemoreceptors, and they can detect an electrical charge from flowers with nectar. They have to consume honey in order to get to their nectar source. So the closer the nectar source is for them, the better off the bees and the organism is, because they, may run out of fuel before they get their nectar source back to the hive. They return to the hive with nectar in their honey stomach. One bee can visit up to between 50 and 350 flowers in one day and may visit up to 2 million blooms in a lifetime. The bee will collect about half of its weight in nectar in one trip. It'll make about 15 trips a day, and over the course of its lifetime, it will bring in enough nectar to make 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. So bees need a lot of nectar. And you can see on here that I have put that there's 60,000 bees per hive during the nectar flow. About 18,000 of them are foragers. We've talked a little bit about bee communication and the fact that the hive needs a lot of nectar. So here are some nectar sources. Bees seem to prefer white and purplish flowers, and they're attracted to what we would consider old world plants. If you think about it, Apis mellifera comes from the area that's between the Ural Mountains in Russia and maybe Poland area in Europe. And so they co-evolved with plants that we think of as European plants, not plants that are native to North America. Bees are opportunistic. They want a lot of nectar in one place. They don't want to have to go from plant to plant to plant where the plants are separated. So while it's great to plant plants with nectar, bee-friendly plants in your garden, what bees are really looking for is someplace like this field that you see on the left hand of the screen where there are a lot of flowers and they can collect a lot of nectar in one place. So pollination, which we rely on, is a byproduct of the bees' search for food. The crops below are from a 2016 survey, and they said that in Washington, bee pollinated crops were valued at about $3 billion. So if you look at the crops that are in the table on this slide, let's think about which ones are pollinated by bees. In Washington is the #1 producer of apples in the United States, and those are pollinated by bees. Washington produces a lot of blueberries. Those are also pollinated by honeybees, although native pollinators do better with blueberries because of the shape of the flower. Hops are wind pollinated. Pears are pollinated by bees. Spearmint is pollinated by bees. Sweet cherries are pollinated by bees. Going to the #2 list, Washington is #2 in terms of production of apricots, pollinated by bees. Onions, pollinated by bees. Potatoes, pollinated by bees. Raspberries, pollinated by bees. And then in the #3 column, peppermint is pollinated by bees. The others are wind pollinated. So what happens when the bees bring the nectar to the hive? At the hive door, bees know their sisters through pheromones. They will also allow a strange bee to come in if that stranger has a lot of nectar. The foragers pass off nectar to her sister bees, and they go through about 8 bees before the nectar is put into a cell for evaporation. During each time that the honey or the nectar is passed from bee to bee, Enzymes and proteins are added from the saliva of the bees, and this breaks down the nectar from complex sugars into simple sugars, glucose and fructose, and prevents nectar from fermenting and crystallizing. So foragers are transferring the nectar containing the enzymes to the house bees at the hive entrance, and they know each other, like we said, from by smell through pheromones. Um, at this point, again, when it's passed between from bee to bee, more enzymes are added. And interestingly, the hive knows what is needed in terms of foragers and storers. So if the hive needs more bees to forage because they aren't bringing in a lot of nectar, some of the bees that were storage bees will become foragers, and vice versa. If there's a lot of nectar coming in, some of the foragers might become store bees. So inside the hive, um, you have the process of storing and processing the nectar. So storage occurs in the honeycomb, and the bees make honeycomb for food and brood. The bees create thousands of hexagonal wax cells because these are an efficient use of space. And the hexagonal shape is created by the weight of the wax, it's not a deliberate shape by the bees. And the bees require 6 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So if you think about it, the most valuable resource in the hive is the wax. Honeycomb is used for food storage and for brood rearing. And so here we've got a example of a brood frame, a very nice brood frame, an example of a super frame full of honey. So processing in the hive. Oh, I think I talked a little bit about this. The honey is passed from individual to individual. Each individual adds more enzymes. The nectar with enzymes can be passed off 7 to 9 times before it's put into the honeycomb. When the nectar is put into the comb, it's stored there until it's ripe. That means when you say honey is ripe, that means that the moisture is around 18%. The bees will help the reduction of water in the nectar by fanning their wings for evaporation purposes. After the nectar gets down to the 18% water mark or below, the bees will seal the comb with wax to prevent any more moisture from getting in. If it's too moist, then you have to worry about fermentation. Usually it takes about 2 days for the bees to transform nectar into honey, and each honeybee gathers, like I said before, enough nectar to make 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. Depending on the nectar flow, one beehive can make about 200 pounds of honey in a season. In the Pacific Northwest, the bees need about 40 pounds of honey for the winter. And that really depends on where in the Pacific Northwest somebody lives. Um, so, so humans and honey. Humans have been gathering honey for many, many years. There is rock art that depicts honeycombs, swarms of bees, and honey collecting as far back as 40,000 years ago. And such art has been seen in Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia. There is an 8,000-year-old cave painting in Spain, showing humans harvesting honey, and it's been used and honey has been used as food and medicine by cultures throughout the world since then. Honey was the main sweetener in Europe. Let's see. Until the Middle Ages, when crusaders brought sugar back from the Middle East. So, because of that, mead was the main alcoholic drink, the drink of kings and queens, until sugar became widely available because wine requires sugar. And like I said, evidence of honey gathering in all of these places. I thought that this map was really interesting. This shows the spread of honeybees across the United States. Your early Europeans brought honeybees by ship to the New World, and it took them a while because it was hard for them to keep hives alive as they were going across the ocean for months at a time. In the mid 1600s, they were found throughout the eastern seaboard. So you can see over on the right-hand side in the 13 colonies, there were bees as early as 1622. And then they spread out across the United States. By the 1800s, they were in the Midwest. The Latter-day Saints took bees to Utah in the mid 1800s, and bees were introduced to the West Coast in 1853. It looks like the latest date on this map is up in North Dakota, which is kind of, or South Dakota actually, which is kind of interesting. Oh, nope, Idaho, all of those places. But the Dakotas are now a big bee honey producing area. So it's interesting that the last place that they showed up was in that area. And how do people go about collecting honey? Um, Collection posed some difficulties for humans. They didn't really want to have to go out and search for a sweetener. Um, Early on, they would chase bees down, follow a bee line, to find feral bees in hollow trees. And so when bee hunters, honey hunters were gathering honey in this way, they would have to destroy the hive to get at the honey. Because humans are um, they want to be efficient or lazy, depending on how you look at it. They tried to use a whole bunch of different ways to keep bees so that they wouldn't have to go in search of honey. Necessity was the mother of invention. So they used logs, they used pipes, they used skeps. The oldest intact apiary was found in Israel with clay pipes dating back about 3,000 years. You all are probably very familiar with this. The people that I was talking to didn't really know much about hives, but the Greeks actually were the first to develop movable frames. And by the mid 18th century, they did have movable frames and they used stacked boxes, but they weren't as effective as the Langstroth hive, which was developed in the mid 19th century by Langstroth, who was a depressed minister, and he made some observations of bees that he was keeping in champagne boxes. He was the one that saw that there was a bee space of 3/8 of an inch, and he designed frames so the bees wouldn't fill the space between the frames with wax so that he could easily move the frames about. Um, and he also built sturdy frames for easier extraction. So I just included this slide in here. This is me on the left-hand side with another member of my club. We are doing it the hard way where we're getting comb out of the frames or using an extractor. So um, people now collect excess honey in supers, which are the smaller frames. They remove the supers from the hives as the bees fill the supers or as the bees fill the frames in the supers. Traditionally, we've removed honey toward the end of August or in early September. But after I listened to a talk by Priya from WSU. I started actually extracting even earlier than that, so that I could get the honey, the extra honey out and allow the bees to replenish the honey. It's a sticky process to remove the cappings from the frames if you don't have something, an automated machine to do so. And it has to be done in a hot environment. So frankly, it's one of the things that I like least about beekeeping, which I think you can tell by the look on my face in that slide. Uh, Everything in my house is sticky. And then even after you extract the honey, you have to bottle it. So it's a long, sticky process. And here's some pictures of folks in my club. We've got an extractor here, which uses centrifugal force. Again, the extraction worm has to be very warm. The extraction room has to be very warm and it's sticky. Um, so you're all probably pretty familiar with this. So what I showed before were hobbyist beekeepers extracting honey. How do commercial beekeepers extract honey? Um, so they, as you know, the commercial beekeepers take their bees down to California. About 90% of all honeybees go to California for the almond bloom. That's about 80 billion US honeybees. Almonds are honeybee dependent for pollination. The bloom lasts about 1 month. Commercial beekeepers make more money from taking their bees to California for pollination. And honey is now a byproduct of pollination, not the main source of income for commercial beekeepers. After almonds, the beekeepers go elsewhere. They come to Washington for apples, blueberries, and cherries. They go to the Dakotas where they find good nectar sources in clover and other flowers. The Dakotas are now the top honey producing states in the United States. Some beekeepers do stay in California for the plum, cherry, and avocado bloom. Commercial beekeepers may have between 100 and 80,000 hives. 80 honey farms in North Dakota has about 80,000 hives. This is a video about extraction. I don't think that we need to have the uh, volume here, so I'm going to just play it so that you can see how the extraction works. So that's kind of that's actually a small commercial honey extraction, but it gives you an idea of what goes into it, taking the caps off, saving the wax because like I said, it's really valuable, and bottling the honey. I kind of wish that I had a tank like that I could bottle honey with. So, buying and using honey. What is real honey? Is it real honey? I guess is the question that you should ask when you're buying honey. It's one of the most adulterated food crops in the world. In fact, I went to a seminar where a woman who was a beekeeper in China would send her honey to Germany to be tested in a lab because the Chinese market is so full of adulterated product that people want to see some kind of certification that it's actually real honey. The estimates are that 1/3 to 1/2 of all honey is adulterated. People put corn syrup and rice syrup into honey, or they water the honey down. And again, much of the adulterated honey that comes into the US comes in through China. And if you were to go to the National Honey Board website or other organizations that are devoted to honey, you would see that they're trying very hard to work on legislation to prevent the importation of adulterated honey. The US has put high tariffs on Chinese honey, but what China has done is it's sent honey through other countries and said, oh, it's Vietnamese honey or Malaysian honey to get around that problem. So, how to read honey labels. You often see these different kinds of labels on your honey. When you're choosing honey, you're likely to come across labels that have the words like raw, pure, organic, and unfiltered, but you may be left asking what exactly the difference is. In many cases, the honey can be more than one of these things, but they each mean something different, and knowing which is which helps you choose the healthiest and the best tasting honey. To make it easier to understand the different kinds of honey, we'll explain generally the general accepted definitions for each of these types of honey. So you want to avoid honey that's ultra filtrated. You want to make sure that the only ingredient in the jar is honey, and you want to look for the true source certified honey. So raw honey is um, pure honey that, in addition to being pure, has not been heated to the point of pasteurization. So it hasn't been heated up to more than 118 degrees Fahrenheit. The benefit of not heating the honey is that the natural occurring enzymes, vitamins, and minerals are preserved, and you get the full benefits of them from eating raw honey. Many beekeepers who produce raw honey are also aware that how they care for the bees and handle the honey has a big impact on the honey you eat. So it's a good bet that raw honey is good for the bees too, and the process has been handled with care. If you have the choice between raw honey versus honey that isn't considered raw, raw honey is a better choice for health, taste, bees, and the environment. Pure honey, that label means that you're getting 100% honey without any other ingredients such as corn syrup, which is sometimes added to industrial honey to reduce costs. However, pure honey alone doesn't always tell you much about the varietal or how the honey is produced. So it's good to look for more information to make sure you're getting all the benefits you can from honey when it's produced in the most bee and environmental friendly way. I think maybe I have extra slides. Yeah, here's raw honey. And this is probably, if you're a small beekeeper or hobbyist, you're probably just producing raw honey. And one of the things about raw honey is that it tends to crystallize very quickly because it has things in it. And here's pure honey. So, and moving on, unfiltered honey. Filtering is a process that the honey's put through to remove the very small particles, often even as small as the pollen. Filtering honey is not the same as straining it, which is commonly done to remove bee parts and other large debris before jarring, while still retaining the pollen and other beneficial qualities of the honey. With filtration, honey is often heated to become more liquid in order to make the filtering process easier, meaning that the honey is no longer raw. Therefore, unfiltered honey is not necessarily raw honey unless it's labeled that way, but it will be closer to its state straight from the hive than honey that's been filtered. Um, Again, choosing raw, unfiltered honey ensures that most of the honey's properties have been preserved. Organic honey is produced from the nectar of organically grown plants and without that don't have chemical miticides to treat bees. Oh, and they haven't used chemical miticides to treat the bees. So buying organic honey ensures that you avoid contact with pesticides that may be sprayed on or near the plants visited by honeybees. Of course, bees usually fly up to 2 miles from the hive looking for flowers, which means that all the flowers within this 2 to 5 mile radius must be certified organic in order for the honey to truly be organic. As you would expect, this can be difficult to control, but an organic certification is a good way you can be mostly sure that the apiary is taking care to ensure that the honey is organic. It's also important to remember that honey labeled organic is not necessarily raw or minimally processed unless it's labeled that way. Most of the certified organic honey available in the US is imported in large quantities from Brazil or other foreign countries and undergoes pasteurization and heavy filtration. So if you want raw organic honey, you're going to have to look for both of those things on the label. Where to buy honey? Let's see. You can buy it at farmers markets, at your local market, you can buy it at URM or Safeway. A lot of times though, that honey is probably going to have had at least water added. Raw honey and honey that has not been filtered a lot is going to be crystallized. And I've even been to like Whole Foods and seen crystallized honey on the shelf. If you find honey that's been crystallized, don't be afraid to buy it. You can always uh, use it as a spread. You can heat it up and make it more liquidy, or you could even add water to it. So don't be afraid if you see crystallized honey. Cooking with honey. This was what interested the family home science educators the most, and it's really the thing that I talk about the least because you can easily go onto the internet and find lots of recipes dealing with honey. The honey.com website, in addition to talking about bees and honey, also has a lot of recipes, and you just have to type in recipes with honey and you'll find a lot, a plethora of honey recipes. So you can use honey to sweeten hot beverages. You can use it to baking. You could put it on your cheese board. You can put it in a glaze or a marinade. Try roasting vegetables with it. Add sauces and dressing. You just have to take care to use a little bit lower temperature than you would normally. And if you're going to have a higher temperature, you might want to add it at the end of the recipe because heat may change the flavor of the honey. Some other general tips, let's see, yeah, for baking with honey is that you can substitute about a half a cup of honey for 2/3 cup white sugar. The stronger the flavor of the honey, the less you may want to use. Personally, I often replace all of the white sugar in a recipe with about half the amount of honey. So if a recipe calls for 1 cup of white sugar, I will put in 1/2 cup of honey. You may want to reduce the liquid called for in the recipe by about 1/4 of a cup for every 1 cup of sugar replaced. And for every 1/2 cup of honey you use, you may want to add about 1/8 of a teaspoon of baking soda along with the other dry ingredients. Unless the recipe already calls for baking soda, then you don't have to add any more. You'll want to reduce your oven temperature by about 25 degrees Fahrenheit to avoid too much browning. And you want to remember that honey is about 25% sweeter than regular sugar. So a little bit about honey's health benefits. onto this. So nutritionally speaking, raw honey contains very small amounts of a wide variety of vitamins, minerals, proteins, and disease-fighting antioxidants that theoretically make it more healthful than granulated sugar. But honey is mostly a combination of glucose and fructose, some of the same sugary substances that make up white sugar, as well as other liquid sweeteners from natural sources such as agave and maple syrup. So a sweetener is a sweetener. It's likely safe for use as a natural sweetener, a cough suppressant, and a topical product for minor sores and wounds. Avoid giving honey even a tiny taste to babies under the age of 1 year. Honey can cause a rare but serious gastrointestinal condition, infant botulism, um, which is caused by exposure to Clostridium botulinum spores. Bacteria from the spores can grow and multiply in a baby's intestines, producing a dangerous toxin. Let's see what I've got in the next one. When modern antibiotics were developed, medicinal uses of honey fell out of favor, but with the development of antibiotic-resistant bacteria in recent decades, researchers are looking at honey again because of its antibacterial qualities. Because bacteria don't generally seem to develop a resistance to honey, it has had some therapeutic potential for use as a broad spectrum antibiotic, one that treats different types of infections. If you're going to go with that, though, you need to follow your doctor's orders. This potential benefit doesn't trump the known benefits of modern medicine. Honey is the subject of ongoing research as a potential ingredient in supplements and medications that could be used to treat a wide range of health issues, including asthma, gum disease, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, diarrhea, fungal infections, inflammation, internal and external ulcerations, viruses, and even certain types of cancers. Because most experiments to date have been performed on laboratory animals and in petri dishes using specially prepared medical grade honey, it's not clear yet if or exactly how honey can be used successfully by people for most of these conditions. If future research confirms honey's effectiveness in humans, scientists will also need to determine which types of honey are potent enough to have medicinal effect, and when taken orally, how much honey is affected for different conditions. The Mayo Clinic has done research on some specific conditions, including cardiovascular disease, coughing, gastrointestinal disease, neurological disease, and wound care. And so if you're interested, you might want to take a look at the Mayo Clinic's website. Some other bee products. Let's see. Wax. We talked about how valuable wax is. It's a byproduct that is used in cosmetics, candles, and let's see, and other soaps and other products. Propolis is a potential antimicrobial, an antiseptic, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. It's been used in a bunch of different areas this way. You can purchase tinctures of it on the internet, but please be aware, like honey, that you really need to speak with your doctor and try to follow the science. Pollen. You may hear recommendations for using bee pollen for alcoholism, asthma, allergies, health maintenance, premenstrual syndrome, enlarged prostate or stomach problems. It's also supposedly an energy tonic, but there's no proof that it helps with any of these conditions. So again, before you take any natural product for a health condition, check with your doctor. Bee pollen sometimes has been recommended by herbalists to enhance athletic performance. reduce the side effects of chemotherapy, and improve allergies and asthmas. But again, medical research hasn't shown that bee pollen is effective for any of these kind of health concerns. Finally, royal jelly. So royal jelly is that substance that is fed to larvae for, I believe, 3 days, and then to the larva that's going to become the queen after that. And it's made up of proteins, sugar, and fatty acids, and it's used as a nutritional supplement and a cosmetic agent. Some research suggests that it may be helpful for diabetes, high cholesterol, or premenstrual syndrome. But again, there's limited evidence of these benefits. And one of the things about royal jelly is that in order to collect it, you end up having to kill bees because you have to get it out of the cell by going past the larva. So here are the resources that I used to put this presentation together. Thank you very much for being here. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see if there's any questions. It's unusual for me to be the presenter and the person dealing with Zoom. So please give me a little bit of grace here. All right. Oh, it just said we can't hear the audio. I'm sorry about that. I don't really know. Are there any other questions about honey or the presentation or any general bee questions that Ellen or I can answer for you? So thank you everyone for participating. We really appreciate you coming. This is probably going to be the last Ask a Washington Beekeeper forever. This presentation will be available on our YouTube channel. We are thinking that we're going to go in a different direction by producing videos that'll be helpful to folks. Book recommendations for newbies. Uh, Beekeeping for Dummies is a good one. There's what is Kim Flotus's book? Do you know, Ellen?
Well, was it just for new beekeepers? The one is sort of the classic that everybody enjoys is Tom Seeley's Honeybee Democracy. And if you're looking for how to raise and manage honeybees, that would be, not the one that I'd recommend, but for an enjoyable, really thought-provoking book that tells you a lot about beekeeping, I'd recommend Tom Seeley's book, Honeybee Democracy. If you're looking for a good beginner book, just to get acquainted with all the things necessary to manage honeybees, I mean, the Honeybees for Dummies is an amazing book. I hate that title for the series, but the information in it is valid, and it does a really good job of talking about beekeeping regardless of where you live. So it does apply in Washington State very definitely. And it's easy to understand and to use. There's
I think
a
that's
whole list of ones that we could recommend, but those would be a starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're really interested, I'm going to put our West Plains Beekeepers email address in the chat. We have a list that we provide to our classes. And so if you're interested in getting a list of books, then we can easily send you a copy of that document.
Well, I think one of the things to emphasize, Margot, that you did a good job of covering in the video, in the presentation, but always keep any burr comb, any wax that you scrape off of your hive, always have a container by your hives as you're working them, because as Margot said, that wax is really a good source for all sorts of different products, and people do buy wax from beekeepers. So if you can collect it and keep it and melt it down and put it into little bricks, you definitely can sell that, and it has value.
Yeah, yeah. I tend to try to make some things with the wax. So I've got quite a few bricks of wax, and the way that I deal with that is that I melt it down in a pot that is I melt it down actually in a pot with water. You have to be really careful because beeswax is extremely flammable. So I melt it down in a pot of water. Then I let it solidify on top of the water. And then I'll take that cake, which still has bee parts and things like that, and I will melt it down in a double boiler. And then pour the wax through an old nylon, and that will take out most of the goop. And then the old nylon with the wax and the goop in it is a terrific fire starter if you ever need one. So, are there any other questions? Well, I want to thank everyone so much for participating in Ask Washington Beekeeper. All of our videos are available from the last 2 years are available on our YouTube video, the Washington State Beekeepers YouTube video, which I'll post in Ask a Washington Beekeeper. If you're interested in having sessions with a beekeeper, I know that Woods Bees on the west side has a coffee with a beekeeper on the first and the third Saturdays of the month. So you might want to check out their website if you want to check in with a experienced beekeeper and ask questions. And you can always reach out to us at info@wasba.org, and somebody will answer your question. Is there anything else, Ellen?
I do not see any comments on my site.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for spending time with us, and good luck with your bees.